You never think it'll happen to you. I mean, who does? You fall in love, you get married, and you think, this is it. We've got this figured out. But the truth is love isn't enough when you stop showing it. I'm Daniel. 6 years ago, I married Clara. We were the couple everyone envied, inseparable, full of laughter, dreaming about a future we'd build together. Fast forward, and life happened. The house, the bills, the constant grind. It all became this monotonous loop. Somewhere in all that, we stopped seeing each other. Our house was modest, tucked in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of place that looks peaceful on the outside but hides the chaos within. Clara and I didn't fight often, but silence? That was louder than any argument we could have had. I thought working hard, keeping a roof over our heads, and planning for the future was enough. I thought my actions said, I love you. But Clara? She saw something different. She saw a man too tired to talk, too focused on the next paycheck to notice the little things. She felt stuck, like she was just another piece of furniture in the house we were building. Then Sean entered the picture. He was an old friend of hers, someone she'd always had a soft spot for, even before we met. I didn't know it at the time, but their conversation started innocently enough, catching up on life and sharing old memories. But for Clara, those chats became an escape from our life, an escape from me. Looking back, there were signs. The extra time on her phone, the way she'd laugh at his texts, that distant look in her eyes when we sat across from each other at dinner. But I ignored them, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to believe something was wrong. I thought we were just in a rough patch, something every couple goes through. I had no idea the foundation of our marriage was already cracking. It started small, subtle things most people wouldn't even notice. But when you've lived with someone for years, you notice. Clara began staying late at work more often than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had a demanding job, and staying late once in a while wasn't new. But then it became routine. Her phone was always with her, even when we were eating dinner. If it buzzed, she'd glance at it and immediately flip it over. She used to share everything with me, her funny work stories, random texts from friends. But now there was this barrier, like she was keeping a part of her life away from me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. At night, she'd say she was tired, too tired to talk, too tired to connect. She'd turn to her side and go straight to sleep. It felt like I was living with a ghost of the person I married. I didn't know it at the time, but Clara had convinced herself that her actions weren't wrong. She told herself she was looking out for herself, that she deserved the attention Sean was giving her. In her mind, I had stopped caring about her, stopped seeing her. But that wasn't true. I cared. I just showed it differently, by working hard, by making sure we had what we needed, by being there. Sean, though? He made her feel special. That's what she thought. He'd compliment her, make her laugh, listen to her complain about things I never even knew were bothering her. She began comparing him to me, telling herself that Sean understood her in ways I didn't. The worst part? She believed it. And because she believed it, the affair didn't feel wrong to her. Not at first. To her, it was just harmless fun, a way to feel alive again. She didn't realize that every small step she took toward Sean was a step away from me. Over the weeks, the changes in Clara became more obvious. She'd come home and barely say a word. If I asked how her day was, she'd give me a short answer and change the subject. The warmth we used to share, the inside jokes, the random conversations, it was all gone. She was physically there, but emotionally somewhere else. And then there were the lies. She'd say she had meetings late into the evening, or had to stay late to finish a project. But sometimes, her excuses didn't add up. Like when she came home one night and said she had a meeting at the office, but I noticed her hair was done differently, and she was wearing perfume she hadn't touched in months. I wasn't stupid. I didn't have solid proof, but the pieces were starting to fit together. Still, I didn't confront her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of escalating a brewing conflict. Afraid of what I might hear. afraid of what it would mean for us. I battled with my thoughts for weeks, questioning whether I should bring it up. What if I was wrong? What if this was just a rough patch in our marriage? Still, the doubt gnawed at me, and I knew I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. So, one evening after dinner, I decided to confront her. I chose my words carefully. I didn't want to accuse her outright. I wanted to give her a chance to tell me the truth. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice calm, "is everything okay between us? You've seemed distant lately. I feel like something's bothering you and I just want to understand." She froze for a moment. Then, she quickly recovered and looked at me with wide eyes. "What do you mean? Everything's fine," she said, her tone light but her expression guarded. I took a deep breath and pressed on. "You've been coming home late, spending a lot of time on your phone. You've just been different. Are you seeing someone else?" Her reaction was immediate and intense. "What?" she exclaimed, her voice rising. "How could you even think that? You're being ridiculous, Daniel. Paranoid even. I can't believe you would accuse me of something like that." Her words stung, but it wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Her voice was sharp, defensive, almost panicked. She didn't try to reassure me. She didn't laugh it off or try to ease my worries. Instead, she attacked me, as if the very question was an insult. At that moment, something shifted inside me. Her denial didn't feel like the truth. It felt like a wall, a barrier she was putting up to keep me from seeing what was on the other side. Her reaction wasn't the response of someone with nothing to hide. It was the response of someone who had everything to hide. I didn't argue with her. I didn't raise my voice or try to push further. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Okay." But inside, I knew I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The doubt I'd been carrying had just turned into certainty. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out the truth. One evening, Rachel came home late. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders slumped as she set her bag down on the dresser and headed straight for the shower. She barely mumbled a greeting to me, which wasn't unusual. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly. Her phone buzzed on the dresser next to me. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just one of her usual notifications, work emails, social media, or maybe a group chat. But then it buzzed again. The second vibration pulled my attention. Curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen. That's when I saw it. A message from an unknown number. "I miss you already. When can I see you again?" For a second, my mind refused to process the words. I stared at the screen, reading them over and over. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind, each one darker than the last. Who was this person? What did this mean? Could it really be what I thought it was? I didn't confront Rachel immediately. I wasn't ready for answers, at least not without proof. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and took a photo of the screen, making sure to capture the number and the message. Then, I placed her phone back exactly as it was and sat frozen in the moment until she came out of the bathroom. The next morning, Rachel left for work as usual. She gave me a peck on the cheek before heading out the door, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Once she was gone, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo of the message on my phone. The unknown number was burned into my brain now. I had to know who it was. I remembered Rachel's email password. It wasn't hard to guess. She used it for just about everything. I logged into her account, my hands shaking as I sifted through her inbox. I scrolled and searched, but I didn't find anything blatantly incriminating. No love letters, no exchanges with a mystery man. Frustration started to bubble up. Was I overreacting? Could the message have been a misunderstanding? But then I thought about how secretive she had been lately. The late nights, the distracted conversations, the subtle emotional distance I had been feeling. I couldn't let it go. That's when I decided to take a step I never thought I'd take. I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, something out of a movie, not my own life. But I needed answers, and I needed the truth. I handed the investigator the phone number from the message and explained my suspicions. He didn't seem surprised. He'd probably seen this scenario 100 times before. "Give me a few days," he said, his tone calm and professional. Those few days felt like an eternity. Every time Rachel smiled at me or casually mentioned her day at work, I wanted to yell at her, to demand the truth, but I held back, knowing I needed concrete evidence. When the investigator finally called me back, his voice was steady, but the words he delivered hit me like a sledgehammer. "It's a man called Sean," he said. "They've been meeting regularly. A lot of these meetings sometimes happen before she goes to work. Mornings, and other times evenings too." Sean. I knew him. He was someone Rachel had mentioned in passing before, a friend from her childhood. I had never thought much about him, just another name in her stories. But now, that name felt like poison. The investigator provided more details, confirming my worst fears. There was no ambiguity now, no room for doubt. Rachel was having an affair with Sean. The mornings she had left early, the late nights she'd explained away as work stress, they all fit into a puzzle I didn't want to see completed. I sat there, holding the investigator's report, my stomach in knots. The betrayal wasn't just about the physical aspect of her affair. It was about the lies, the deception, and the fact that I had been made a fool in my own home. She had lied to my face, looked me in the eye, and denied everything when I gave her a chance to tell me the truth. And now, here it was, undeniable proof of her betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I didn't have the strength for that. Instead, I went home and walked to the bedroom. I grabbed my old duffel bag from the closet, the one I hadn't touched since our last weekend getaway together, back when we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Slowly I packed. A few shirts, some pants, socks, and the essentials. My hands moved mechanically, my mind replaying every moment of our marriage. The good times, the bad times, the moment she chose someone else over us. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the desk by the window and pulled out a notepad. My handwriting was shaky, my thoughts tangled, but I knew what I needed to say. "I gave you a chance to tell me the truth. I hope he was worth it." I stared at those words for a long time. They weren't perfect, but they held all the pain and disappointment I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the dresser, where she'd be sure to see it. As I zipped up the bag, I glanced around the room one last time. Every corner held memories, some beautiful, some haunting now. I walked out of the house, and for the first time, I let the tears fall. My breath came in shaky gasps as I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. When I left Clara, it wasn't a decision I made lightly. I had to start the divorce proceeding. Clara was devastated when I left. At first, she tried calling me constantly. My phone would buzz late into the night with messages ranging from desperate apologies to pleas for me to talk to her. I ignored every one of them and continued with the divorce. I wasn't being cruel for the sake of it. I needed space. Talking to her felt pointless. What was there to say? She had already made her choice when she betrayed me, and I wasn't going to let her drag me through the aftermath of her decisions. She eventually stopped calling, realizing I had no intention of rebuilding our future together. From what I heard later, that's when it all started to sink in for her. She began to see the emptiness of the relationship she had ruined her marriage for. The man she cheated with, Sean, wasn't interested in building anything meaningful. I doubt he has any plans to marry her. Clara's friends and family took notice of what had happened. Some were kind to her, offering support and reminding her that people make mistakes. Others weren't so forgiving. They saw what she had done as a betrayal, not just of me, but of the life we had built together. I found out later that Clara started going to therapy. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe she was doing it to win me back, or maybe she truly wanted to understand why she had done what she did. From what I heard, therapy forced her to confront a lot of things about herself, things she hadn't wanted to face. It's strange, knowing that the woman I loved was finally starting to change, but not for me. By the time Clara began rebuilding herself, I had already decided I couldn't go back. Some things, once broken, can never be the same. I hadn't planned on seeing Clara again, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. A mutual friend of ours, Karen, was hosting a party, and she had insisted I come. Karen didn't know the full story between Clara and me, only that we'd separated. I thought it would be a simple evening, say hi to old friends, stay for an hour, and leave. But as soon as I walked into the room, there she was. Clara looked different. Her hair was shorter, neatly styled, and her eyes, once filled with confidence, now carried a quiet humility. She caught my eye almost immediately. I could tell she was nervous, her hand tightening around her glass of sparkling water as she smiled faintly in my direction. For a moment I thought about avoiding her, but I knew that wasn't fair. We both deserve closure. After a polite nod, I made my way toward her. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice steady, but with a hint of vulnerability. "Hi." "Hi, Clara," I replied. The awkwardness between us was almost tangible, but I forced myself to keep my tone even. "It's been a while." As the party buzzed on around us, Clara suggested we step outside to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. The crisp evening air was a welcome change from the chatter inside, and we found a quiet spot near the garden. "First, I just want to say how sorry I am," she began, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo, and I've spent so much time trying to understand why I made those choices. I was selfish, and I took you for granted." Her words were raw and honest. This wasn't the defensive Clara I remembered from those final days of our marriage. This was someone who had clearly been doing the hard work of self-reflection. She went on to talk about the therapy sessions she'd attended, the habits she'd worked to change, and how she had started volunteering to help others find purpose in their lives. I listened quietly, nodding occasionally. Part of me felt a flicker of pride in seeing her grow, but it wasn't enough to change my feelings. The betrayal still lingered, even if it had dulled over time. "I just wanted you to know," she said finally, her voice breaking slightly. "I'll never stop regretting what I did to you. But I'm grateful for everything you taught me, even if I didn't see it at the time." When she finished, there was a long pause. I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Clara," I said, my tone calm but firm, "I appreciate you saying all this. I can see you've changed, and I respect how hard you've worked to become a better person. But I've moved on emotionally and in my life." Her face fell slightly, but she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. "I'm with someone now," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "She makes me happy in ways I didn't know I needed." Clara blinked back tears, but there was no anger in her expression, only acceptance. "I'm happy for you," she said after a moment. "Really, you deserve that." We lingered for a few more seconds, the silence between us heavy but not hostile. Finally, I offered a small smile. "Take care of yourself, Clara," I said. "You too, Daniel," she replied, her voice steady now. "Thank you for listening." As I walked back inside, I felt a sense of relief. It wasn't easy to face the person who had hurt me so deeply, but hearing her apology and seeing her growth gave me closure. It was the end of a chapter one had once thought would define me forever.